Welcome to the Capital News. I am your host, Alex Correttis. Today is May 22nd, 2019. Thank you so much for joining me. Well, it's a cover-up. You heard right here, folks. It's a cover-up. Of course, last week and a half ago, it was a constitutional crisis. Now the lingo is it's a cover-up. Of course, we're talking about President Trump versus the Democrats and sort of a blow-up in a meeting that was supposed to be fruitful and constructive, talking about maybe finally seeing some bipartisanship in the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. Maybe, just maybe, we were going to see a deal struck when it came to infrastructure. One of the only things that we have been discussing here for quite a while that we thought might actually get done, because it's really the only thing that both parties could agree to and the president would sign off on it. Now, because Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, pretty much says, well, you know what, Mr. President, you are involved in a cover-up. Of course, she's talking about the Russian conspiracy, but more specifically the obstruction of justice and all of the information that's out there in the Bob Mueller report that, of course, has been discussed here and has been discussed all over the internet, all over the media for the past month, and it will continue to make headlines. It will continue to be front and center because we remain in a three-ring circus in Washington, D.C. We have Maxine Waters, we have Elijah Cummings, we have Nancy Pelosi, we have Jerry Nadler, we have Adam Schiff. Everybody is still going full speed ahead with impeachment or investigations. Now, some of the tone surrounding impeachment, you sort of get some mixed signals depending on who you're talking to within the Democrat Party. Obviously, if you're talking to some of the leadership, some of the senior figures within the Democrat Party, it's, well, I don't think impeachment is right for taking on right now. I don't think that's the best policy. Yeah, we don't like the president, but I don't know if it's the best thing politically to do. I don't think that there would be enough votes to actually impeach the president. It could backfire. But then you have some of the new incumbents and some of the younger Democrats saying, oh yeah, full speed ahead, let's impeach the guy. So you have some infighting within the Democrat Party. But nevertheless, this came to a head. This started to boil over when they were actually, hopefully, trying to have a constructive meeting with the president. And then it goes to, you're covering this up, Mr. President. And then, of course, the president said, well, I'm sick and tired of this. I'm leaving the meeting and, case dismissed. We're done here. So now I have no idea what, if anything, will be accomplished over the next year and a half. We for all intents and purposes, we have a lame duck president in his first term. Typically, you'll see this be the case in a president's second term. You have a new president-elect. He's a lame duck during those last few months, unless there's a whole bunch of action going on. But typically speaking, the president becomes a lame duck during his second term because that is his second and final term. So there's not much more that he can accomplish. And obviously you have a new president. Maybe you have a new party coming into power. The political tides have shifted. You're trying to be democratic. You're trying to say, okay, well, I'm not going to overstep here and do some things because the country just elected another president and he or she has this vision. So we're just going to let them obviously learn the ropes during the transition period. They get sworn in and then they can hit the ground running and do what they want. You know what I mean? So it's a crying shame, in all honesty, that this president is, for all intents and purposes, has a lame duck session for the next year and a half. It truly is, if you think about it. I mean, this president has been handcuffed since the beginning. Now, of course, all of the anti-Trumpers out there are going to say, well, this is self-inflicted. He did this to himself. He colluded. He conspired with the Russians. He obstructed justice. I mean, of course, he should be a lame duck, according to the anti-Trumpers, because look what he did to himself. Now, this is all a hoax. This is all a farce. This has all been a setup, which I pray to God comes to light, and the Democrats, the deep state, those within the Obama administration, if not President Obama himself, are held accountable for the investigation, spying, whatever word you want to use, that they conducted on Donald Trump's presidential campaign and on his administration while he was president of the United States. $30 million in a special prosecutor's investigation, ties up the country for 22 months in fines. No collusion, no conspiracy. The special prosecutor, Bob Mueller, punts. He could have made a decision when it came to obstruction of justice, but he said, nope, I'm going to give that decision to Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein at the time and Attorney General Bill Barr. And those two gentlemen concluded that there was not enough evidence to prove in a court of law before a jury that beyond a reasonable doubt that the President of the United States committed obstruction of justice. Now, lawyers argue, they take other sides. We are in a very hostile and divisive political environment, so it's no surprise that the Democrats took the other side of it and said, no, this is clear obstruction of justice. Well, giving credit to where credit is due, Attorney General Bill Barr, during his Senate testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee, said, you know what? I couldn't prove, at least according to my analysis and that of Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, that we should move forward because we don't believe that we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law that the president committed obstruction of justice. He said if the American people think otherwise, they can vote for somebody else in 2020. We can use the democratic system that we have in this country to elect a new president. You can go out there and you can argue all the points you want. I'm the Attorney General. I made my decision. I am not changing my decision. The report is public. It is available to the public. It's available to Congress. You can go out there. You can use this as talking points. You can hammer this home till you're blue in the face. You can do whatever you want. But I am not changing my mind. If the American people are fed up with it, they believe this was clear obstruction of justice, or however they want to rationalize it, they can say so and they can vote. They can put somebody else in the White House in 2020. That's reasonable to me. Should be reasonable to you. And now we know that there is an investigation underway in regards to the genesis of this whole conspiracy, this whole hoax, this whole Trump-Russia collusion conspiracy theory. Now, how long is this going to take? Because if it takes 22 months, like it did the special prosecutor, to find out all of this stuff, which led to a big nothing burger, how long is it going to take the U.S. Attorney from the state of Connecticut to conduct his investigation? So it makes me think that there has been an investigation underway for quite some time, because the president is going to have to have a report come out from this U.S. attorney, and it's going to have to show the findings of it. And then it's going to have to be made public. It's going to have to be disseminated. Everybody's going to have to rifle through it and say, well, what took place here? He's going to have this happen before the 2020 election, because this is the bombshell. This is his trump card, if you will. These are the fireworks that we have been talking about. This is the Kickstarter to all of this stuff to say, you know what? President Obama and his administration, they were pretty shady. In fact, they were probably involved in some illegal activities. We know for a fact, given Lisa Page's testimony, that the President Obama, wanted to be kept in the loop. He wanted to be kept up to speed on everything that was taking place with this Trump-Russia conspiracy stuff. Now, you can say, well, I mean, if that was true, it's a national security problem. Now, did anybody within the FBI or any other government agency approach Donald Trump and his campaign and say, you know what? We think the Russians are attempting to infiltrate your campaign? Did anybody go to Donald Trump and his campaign and do that? No, they didn't. They did that with other campaigns. They do that in other cases involving this or involving something else. If you have some other foreign entity trying to meddle in some sort of U.S. corporation, a political campaign, and the FBI catches wind of it, they tell the people involved. You know why? Because then they can say, you can work for us, you can wear a wire, you can gather information, you could lead them down a path so we can keep track of them. Did they do that with Donald Trump? No, they didn't. So that's a clear indicator that something was wrong. Yes, President Obama should have been aware and should be up to date on these things, but shouldn't the DOJ and the FBI have informed Donald Trump and his campaign that they were being infiltrated? They didn't do that. They didn't do that at all. So that's suspicious. It's highly suspicious to me. You got James Clapper, you got John Brennan, you got James Comey. All these names, huge names, by the way. These aren't little peons in the government. These are top executives, if you will, in the deep state. These are big names. These are powerful men and women. What's going to happen to them? Well, if you're paying attention in the media, they're starting to point the finger at each other. Oh, well, no, that was Jim Comey's fault. He made that decision. It wasn't me. I'm John Brennan. I'm with the CIA. I had nothing to do with this. James Comey. Oh, well, Rod Rosenstein, how dare he? How dare he do what he did? How dare he say there was no obstruction? There was clear, blatant obstruction of justice. How dare he sign off with Attorney General Bill Barr to say there was no obstruction of justice? Then Rod Rosenstein comes out and says, oh, my goodness, what a hypocrite. What a joke Jim Comey is. I mean, they're starting to point the fingers at each other. We told you this was happening. This has been happening for months. We had the 60-minute interviews with Andrew McCabe. I mean, it's one thing after the next. At first, I really thought that a couple of them would have been sticking together. And that's why they came out publicly, because then they could say, look, here's our story. We're trying to get ahead of all of this. But now, it no longer seems to be the case. It's sort of every man for himself. And it's going to get very nasty because these people know what they did. They know they abused their authority. They know they abused their power. And we know that the genesis of all of this Steele dossier, was made up. It's a fraud in and of itself. It was bought and paid for by Hillary Clinton, her campaign, the DNC, put together by Fusion GPS, an opposition research firm. I mean, this isn't even a spy novel. This is pathetic. And then you have the idiots, because you find out through the testimony, you have idiots within the deep state calling each other and texting each other, not on a throwaway phone, but on their personal phones. I mean, what the hell kind of organization are these people running here? I mean, my goodness. And then the other kicker, just for the purpose of bringing this to everyone's attention because of the hypocrisy that drives me crazy, we meddle in everybody else's election. It's perfectly fine. I mean, we're sending people down there in Venezuela trying to overthrow Maduro, trying to install Guaido. That's no problem. But if the Russians buy a few ads on Facebook, well, all hell has to break loose. I mean, you square that circle for me and let me know how you do it. Because it's okay for us to do it all over God's creation, but if the Russians even attempt to buy a couple ads on Facebook, oh, we can't have that nonsense, not for a second. Hypocrisy drives me crazy, but nevertheless, this all goes back, again, to the cover-up. It was a constitutional crisis, the president allegedly obstructing justice. Now it's a cover-up. He's covering it up. Why? Because he's sick and tired of all of these investigations, and rightly so, and he's sick and tired of the three-ring circus that's taking place in our nation's capital, in Washington, D.C., where you got Jerry Nadler calling everybody and their mother to testify, who has already testified to Bob Mueller, who already wrote a report, who already said there's no collusion, there's no crime here. So how many more times are we going to ask the same people the same questions and come up with a different answer? This is insanity. This is insanity. Oh, and by the way, we're all paying for it. Fantastic, isn't it? So it's a cover-up, and now this president, for all intents and purposes, is a lame duck president for the remaining 18 months of his first term. Of course, if there's something aside from this, of course, he still has the power to negotiate the trade deals with China, the European Union, and whoever else he wants to go for. But domestically, he's got his hands tied. He has his hands tied. Now, God forbid, and we should all pray that there is no more war. So hopefully there is no further escalation in Iran or anywhere else in the Middle East, and that there's no more escalation with Venezuela. So those things would be within the control of the president, even if he was, quote-unquote, in a lame duck session. But domestically speaking, he has his hands tied. And I guess the calculus, at least for the time being, from the Democrats is, well, we're fine with that. We're fine with that because we're going to run with this president obstructing justice, this president not allowing his members or former members of his White House to testify before Congress for their to provide their oversight duties. So they think that that's going to play out politically. Now, whether or not this leads to actual impeachment is a completely different conversation. Again, if you're talking about the leadership within the Democrat Party, most of them are shying away from saying, yeah, we're going to go and actually impeach the president. But again, if you're looking at the younger members, the new members of the Democrat Party, who are now members of Congress, they're saying, yeah, let's impeach him. So it's going to be very interesting to see. It's very sad oh my goodness, for this country, because we have $22 trillion in debt. We have a demographic cliff that nobody is even acknowledging that is bankrupting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. We already know, and we've discussed this in a previous podcast, that Social Security is going to be insolvent within about a decade, and we know that Medicare is going to be insolvent even before that. Is anybody having a conversation on this? No. So we have Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, the leader of the House of Representatives, saying to this president he is involved in a cover-up. So now the president is walking away from these negotiations regarding infrastructure and getting something done that this country desperately needs. And then in the Senate side, we have leader Mitch McConnell from the state of Kentucky saying, whoa, I have the solution to all of our problems. We're going to increase the smoking age from 18 to 21 and everything's going to be fine. Give me a break. This is who we elect. These are our quote-unquote leaders. I don't even know what to say. I am embarrassed to be an American. You got Nancy Pelosi, you got Mitch McConnell, and then you even have the president. Even though I just defended him and his administration from all of this crap, I do not defend him when it comes to all of the lies and exaggerations that he makes regarding this economy and a whole host of other things. This is the state of the United States of America. This is, people, we should be embarrassed. We should truly be embarrassed. It is not just because of one person. I know everybody wants to say, oh, it's a shame that Donald Trump's there. Everybody's embarrassed. That has very little to do with it. He's a piece of the puzzle, but so is Nancy Pelosi and all of those leaders that I rattle off here all the time in the Democrat Party. And it's the case for the quote-unquote leaders on the Republican side, too. This is a joke. Nobody wants to talk about anything of substance. Let's build a wall. Let's have Mexico pay for it. Let's tweet out great historic numbers that aren't great, that aren't historic. It's a bunch of baloney. It's a bunch of malarkey. And then let's accuse the president of committing a crime, even though we spent $30 million from somebody who was beyond reproach, who has a great resume, who is a good man. Bob Mueller and his team said there was no crime, but nevertheless, we're going to continue to say that the president committed a crime. Can't make this stuff up if you tried. Now, interestingly, if we're talking, and I gotta put in some humor here today, and who's always good for a laugh is obviously Joe Biden. Well, he made some recent statements regarding North Korea. And I'm not going to get into it because I really don't care what this guy says, because he's just such a failure with policy. It's not even funny. But I have to happen to agree with the North Koreans for the first time, because in regards to those comments made, their comeback was, well, you know what? Joe Biden's an imbecile. I mean, I have to agree. He is an imbecile. He's a lunatic. And he's the front runner on the Democrat side for the 2020 presidential campaign election. I mean, he is an imbecile. Sleepy, creepy, crazy Uncle Joe. I mean, let's just call it an imbecile. Maybe the North Koreans nailed it right on the head. I mean, you know, I give this guy a lot of credit from a personal standpoint, because life has thrown him a lot of nasty curveballs. He lost his wife. He lost a couple children. So, I mean, anybody who goes through that, God be with them. But, I mean, when it comes to his leadership or lack of leadership, when it comes to his political life, I mean, the man's a complete disaster. He is an imbecile. He is an idiot. He is a lunatic. I mean, he's getting worse, because, unfortunately, he cannot string a sentence together. Now, I don't know if that's his mind slipping. He's older. That's nothing against anybody who's older. That's what happens. But, I mean, is he going to be fit to be the president of the United States? I mean, he clearly does not have the energy of Donald J. Trump. Not a lot of people do. I mean, I have to applaud the president on that. I mean, I don't know if this guy sleeps, and if he does, he doesn't sleep that much. But the president has a ton of energy. Joe Biden seemingly has very little, has troubles stringing along a sentence. His policies, if he can actually talk about them, are terrible. It's nothing new. It's nothing that's going to transform this country for the better. In fact, it's going to be regressive. I always find that hilarious, how the progressives want to call themselves progressive when, in fact, all of their policies are regressive. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. This is what these people do. Now, despite the fact that Joe Biden has a lot of name recognition, that's what everybody wants to talk about. We got name recognition, so that's why everybody wants Joe Biden to win, or he's up there in the polls. Well, there has been a significant narrowing in his lead over crazy Bernie Sanders. Well, that's fantastic, isn't it? At least in regards to the Iowa polls. Now, just take a step back, take a deep breath, because you have this Democrat Party of today, which is insanity. It's just insanity. You have two old white guys, okay, who are the front runners in the 2020 presidential election on the Democrat side. Two old white guys. Now, I don't care what their age is. I don't care that they're white. I don't care that they're men. But the Democrat Party does. They don't care about necessarily your ideas. They just want to know what's your gender, how old are you, what's your skin color. Those are the most important things to Democrats in the 21st century. Things we're not supposed to be paying attention to. We're supposed to be judging people based off of their qualifications, based off of their merits, based off of their history, based off of their ideas. But nevertheless, 2020 presidential election, two old white guys are leading the field. Now, why is that? Are these the best ideas that the Democrats can put forth? There's nobody else? Or are the ideas of the black men and women that are running, or the white women, old white women, young white women, middle-aged black women, middle-aged black men? I mean, I don't care about this stuff, but this is how the Democrat Party talks. This is how the liberals talk. This is how the socialists talk. So I'm just trying to communicate with those of you out there who are of this mindset. They have no ideas, evidently, or they're terrible, or they're at least not up to par when it comes to Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, two old white guys, which the Democrat Party says is the devil. That is the evil. That is the plague on the United States of America. Yet those are the two people who, at this point, are most likely to get the nomination on the Democrat ticket. Now, I remain consistent on what I've been saying here for months. I still believe that the president, Donald J. Trump, will win re-election in 2020. I think he's going to skip back into the White House. He is going to mop the floor with these lunatics. Now, of course, I have many, many issues with this president. You know that in the letter, so just a quick brief update there. There's a nice segue to talk about the letter and new comments made on Facebook. It's the same crap, ladies and gentlemen. I read some of these articles today, or some of their comments. I mean, I can't even repeat them on this podcast. I'm not going to do it. I mean, it is a true shame. Nobody's reading it. I don't care if people if they actually read it and wanted to come and attack me or debate me. I don't care. I have thick skin. It doesn't bother me. What bothers me, however, is the fact that they didn't read it, and they're making comments, and they're just attacking each other. It is so destructive. I try to put forth this podcast, any articles I write, to be constructive, to add to the discussion, to add to the debate, to add perhaps another flavor or color to the whole discussion. Not to upset people, not to be destructive, but constructive. You go on social media, that is going to be the ruination of this country if it hasn't already taken root. Because nobody's paying attention to the content of the letter. Nobody is paying attention to the details. It's just a headline and a picture, and people are off to the races. So don't be surprised that nobody is talking about $22 trillion in debt. Don't be surprised that nobody is talking about solving the insolvency of Social Security and Medicare, because we have people in this country who probably don't even realize that they're problems. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised either. But what a shame it is to be in the United States of America in 2019, given all of this negative news. Now, again, I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but this is the reality. And if we're going to solve the problem, we can't just say that these problems don't exist. You got to solve a problem, you got to admit it. That's what we do here. Now, lastly, with a brief update to Brexit, well, a little bit more trouble for Prime Minister Theresa May because she has one of her ministers resign, and this has to do, obviously, with her quote-unquote new Brexit deal. Of course, it's the same deal as it was before, with a couple twists to it, which are not pretty at all. She's trying to appease some other people to get this thing to pass because it will go to the vote for the fourth time. So that means it got struck down 3 previous times. The 4th time. So somebody said, you know what, I can't take this anymore. And this has happened throughout this whole process where ministers and even members of the Conservative Party have resigned in just disgust. Because what the Prime Minister has put forth is a bunch of crap. It's basically, there's going to be, we can say Brexit, but it's actually we're still in the European Union. And now there's another kicker that a second referendum could be an option. If this thing passes, if her deal passes on the 4th attempt, it could create a pathway, I should say, for another referendum vote. Can't make this stuff up. Cannot make it up. This is why we talk about it as much as we do here on this podcast. Forget the politics. Forget the economics of it, as interesting as it is, because the pound has now hit a 4-month low on the backdrop of all of this shenanigans with Brexit once again. But it has to do with the institution of democracy. This is what leaders all over the world are doing to their people. The people, they voted. They said this is what we want. We want Brexit. They've been negotiating for going on 3 years. You had a hard deadline for Brexit to take place, deal or no deal, on March 29th. They've kicked the can down the road. We now have another hard deadline on October 31st, Halloween. Who's to say that doesn't get kicked further down the road as well? And we have European parliamentary elections this week. So buckle up. It's a shame. It's a shame to be anybody anywhere in these types of systems. Doesn't matter if you're British, you're American, you're Chinese, you're Japanese. Makes no difference where you are. There is no leadership. What a shame. Thank you so much for joining me, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a pleasure having you as always. Please like, share, subscribe, get the word out. Leave your comments. Let's find some rosier stories to talk about here because I'm getting tired of all this stuff. Maybe somebody will step up to the plate here sooner or later. Maybe somebody will listen to the Capital News and we'll actually have some discussions and debates and we'll start to solve some problems instead of pointing the finger. I think we can do it. I know we can. Thank you so much for joining me. This is the Capital News. I am Alex Koritis. Godspeed.